Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. Who else? And I'm delighted to go all the way to Washington and join the wonderful Greg Swenson. How are you, Greg?
Great to see you, Andrew. I'm doing well, doing well.
It's brilliant. And tell us about the view outside your window.
Behind me is the United States Treasury, which happens to be next to the White House. So it's really on the same property, but you can't see the White House from here. And then right behind me, I think there's the Washington Monument,
Fantastic. Well,
which is in a distance, but the Treasury is right across the street.
brilliant. Well, Greg is the chair of the Republicans Overseas UK and co-founder of the Hamilton Society, which is an organization which provides Anglo-Americans with a platform for free speech, discourse, and debate. Tell me, Greg, what's the atmosphere like there at the moment?
Completely electric, Andrew. It's amazing. So much optimism. There's such a, I mean, part of it's just relief. I think maybe that was more right after the election, was the relief trade, as we call it. There's so much energy, so much optimism in Washington. A lot of American flags everywhere, a lot of red, a lot of MAGA hats. Something you wouldn't have seen 4 years ago or 8 years ago, when I think a lot of closet Trump voters up. It's all out in the open now, and there's just such, as I said, such a great optimism about the future.
No, fantastic. Well, the event is customary, takes place on the steps of the US Capitol, but it's freezing today, isn't it? How cold is it?
It really is. It's -10. You know, I still haven't gotten the hang of Celsius in my 10 years in London, but it's about 24 degrees Fahrenheit right now, but it was pushing, -20 early this morning, -20 Fahrenheit. Sorry, Celsius. So it's just cold. Whatever the number is, it's freezing. It snowed yesterday. The city was a mess. It's completely locked down with security. Basically every block's got Secret Service on it. So, but anyway, in spite of the weather, it's a great day.
Right. And did you go to the event yesterday?
I did. I didn't go to the rally because I was doing some media, but I went to one of the balls last night, the Texas black tie and boots ball. Tonight I'm going to the Starlight Ball, which is one of the inaugural balls that the president will arrive at, president and first lady. And, basically back-to-back events since I got here on Wednesday.
Oh, fantastic. And everybody's talking about the relationship and the special relationship about the UK and the US. How do you think that's going to change with Trump in charge?
Well, I think it will change for the better because it was so difficult with President Biden. President Biden just didn't really like the UK. He always favored Ireland and the EU in any conversations and dialogue. And, a couple of snubs, notably not answering the phone when Boris had British soldiers at risk in Afghanistan, and when Biden was pulling out during that debacle. So, look, there were a lot of mistakes made. Yes, there's a little bit of scar tissue between the current government in the UK and the Trump administration. Some of the things that many of them have said in the past. I hope that we can just overcome that. I think if David Lammy and reaches out and tries to kiss and make up like he did last fall, hopefully we can get over that. President Trump loves the UK. There's no doubt about that.
Well, his mother was Scottish, obviously,
That's
and
right.
he's got a lot
Yeah.
of fondness for that. And David Lammy, I mean, made some very unfortunate comments about President Trump. But so did J.D. Vance. If you look back at the 2016,
Yeah.
just before prior to that, he was calling him the American Hitler, and there was that road to Damascus moment. I thought J.D. Vance basically handled that very well. He said it was the media
Yeah.
who misportrayed him.
Absolutely. Well, look, and but even Marco Rubio, who's an incredibly popular Secretary of State, or soon to be Secretary of State, he had some difficult moments with President Trump in the campaign in 2016. That's just politics. It's no big deal. But there's one thing, when to disagree with your political opponents. The problem with David Lammy and Menace Awad is that, they've called him a fascist, a racist, a white nationalist. I mean, all these absurd things that it's pretty offensive. So I could understand why President Trump has, maybe given a bit of a cold shoulder. But that's all just, like I said, speed bumps in the relationship. I think it's going to work out. I can't wait till President Trump comes to land.
Right. Now, one of the things they've been saying in the media is about claims that Keir Starmer wasn't invited to the inauguration, but actually, putting it into historical context, you tend not to invite leaders from around the world, don't you?
Yeah, it's a case of first of all, it's really difficult to get in and around here. Suella Braverman is here, Priti Patel is here, of course, Nigel Farage, and a big contingent of GB News and Talk TV people. It's great. We had events with kind of British American events Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, even Saturday. Now that I think about it, so there's a real positive atmosphere, but it's difficult for an actual leader of a country because you can't be welcomed in the state visit kind of fashion. It's just not possible. It's just too difficult. So I think people coming that are private as private citizens, it's a lot easier that way, and it's a lot more manageable.
Right. So talk to us about then the schedule for today. What's going to happen?
Yeah, right now I don't know if he's still there, but about an hour ago, the president and the first lady went to a church service in St. John's Episcopal, right across from the White House. Beautiful yellow church, the one that the Antifa people tried to burn down in 2020, and then they'll go to the Capitol. I tell you the truth, Andrew, I don't know if the parade was canceled or not. So many things have been canceled or rescheduled in the last few days, so it's hard to keep up. They moved the ceremony. I heard they were going to move it to the White House, which is right behind me. But there will be activities at both the Capitol and the White House. Most of the ticket holders, like me, even like prime ticket holders, have been moved to the Capital One Arena, which is the basketball and hockey arena where the rally was held yesterday. So that's where a lot of people will be watching it. I'll be running around this neighborhood here between the Hay Adams and the Willard hotels doing media, and so I will not actually be at either the Capitol or the White House, but right across the street from the White House at the Hay Adams.
Right. So about 11 a.m. they had the swearing in ceremony at the Capitol Rotunda, obviously because of the extreme cold, you say -10. When that happens, you get J.D. Vance and Trump take the oaths of office. I understand Trump is going to be using a Bible, two Bibles, one in the 1955, which is his mother, and his mother's Bible, and the other, the 1861, which is Lincoln's. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, that's great. And it's just, I mean, look, the United Kingdom does pomp and circumstance. I mean, it's hard to top the coronation and the Queen's funeral and all the great things that have happened in terms of that historical tradition. But the U.S. is right behind Great Britain in that sense. That this is a moment where you really look back in history and going back to Washington and all the great Englishmen, by the way, who wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. So there's great history, great tradition. It's a great time to be here.
Oh, fantastic. And who, in terms of the British, then we talk about a number of people over there. Nigel Farage, has he managed to catch up with President Trump yet?
I'm sure he has. I can't imagine he hasn't. I'm sure he was at the rally yesterday. He was. I saw him Friday night and Saturday night. Again, it's British American activities. Really great crowd. I think Friday night was, there was the Stars and Stripes and Union Jack party at the Hay Adams, on the roof deck at the Hay Adams. It was just incredible, and just a great crowd that came in from London, and a lot of people and a lot of friends of yours.
Oh, fantastic. Well, no, I've been very jealous. They've been kept me updated as to what's happening. I'm not jealous of the weather, though. -10 is just a little bit nippy. Well, the other relationship which has hit the press is obviously the relationship between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, and they're falling out over Tommy Robinson. Is there any more talk about that in Washington at the moment?
A little bit of gossip, but nothing material. I mean, Friday night, Elon was supposed to be there Friday night. I don't think he arrived. At least I didn't see him, and it wasn't a huge party. It was probably 100 or 200 people, but Steve Bannon was there, and other sort of new nationalist, populist, American first movement people, and so everybody's cool. Everybody's on the same page. I don't really think there's any big issue with Elon.
Well, Elon is brilliant at making those tweets. I'm having a discussion with his father, Errol Musk, a little bit later, who's on my show every day. So we're going to be watching a little watch along on that sort of basis. But one of the things he was saying is that they need a new leader for reform. He doesn't think Nigel's up for the job.
Yeah, I remember that criticism from Elon a few weeks ago, and Elon likes to make statements and throw a grenade in the room, and he also disagreed with President Trump on some of his appointments and was very vocal about that. He didn't want Scott Bessent to be the Secretary of the Treasury. He wanted Howard Lutnick. He thought it'd be more disruptive. Just about everyone in Washington disagrees with that, including President Trump. So Scott will be when confirmed, he'll be the Secretary of the Treasury. And so that's okay. It's okay to disagree. I want people to disagree. I want conversations and arguments to be made. And if Elon's at the center of those, great. He did a great job at the rally yesterday. He had his little boy out there. I don't know if you saw that. Really just, exciting moment.
Oh no, and X, his little boy, he was
That's
loving
right.
the attention.
Yeah. I'm not sure anyone could get away with that except Elon Musk, but it's great. It's cute little boy. He had a real great time out there, as you could see. So yeah, Elon's a real positive addition to this new incoming administration. He and Vivek Ramaswamy will do a great job with Doge, and it's really urgent and important for the country.
Oh no, fantastic. Well, one of the suggestions that Errol Musk, Elon's father, was making on my show is that Elon should invite Steve Bannon into the Doge to help build that relationship. Do you think that would work?
I don't know. Steve is a great guy, and he's so opinionated, and he's got a great head on his shoulders. But I think he would go all Javier Milei and just chainsaw the whole bureaucracy. So I'm not sure I'm not sure that's pending. I think Steve himself would say he's better as a thinker, and he's better running War Room, his podcast. I think he's just such an intellectual, a powerful intellect for the movement. And I think, it would be funny though if he was in Doge.
It's a clever way of sort of say keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. It'll be an interesting thought.
Full chainsaw.
Yeah. Going back to today's events, then this afternoon we got the farewell to Biden and Harris. How's that relationship working out with the people there?
It's really difficult. You can see the coldness between Biden and Kamala, especially between Dr. Jill Biden and Kamala. By the way, I like to say doctor sarcastically because it's so stupid. You saw that real uncomfortable moment at Jimmy Carter's funeral between not only Kamala and Dr. Jill, but between Kamala and everybody, and Dr. Jill and everybody. It's really uncomfortable, especially when the presidents were backslapping and having a good time and getting along. You saw Iraq and President Trump. So it's pretty awkward. Biden himself has said critical things recently. I don't know if it's in his memoir that was released or something, but he was saying he could have won, and really implying that Kamala was it was Kamala's fault that the Democrats lost, which is absurd because she polled a lot better than Biden, as it turns out. And Biden would have lost a few blue states in there. He was polling below President Trump in New Mexico, in Virginia, in New Hampshire. Those are pretty reliable blue Democrat states. So that it was absurd. It was an absurd comment to make, but also, in terms of unrealistic. I don't know where he gets his information, or he just makes it up. But that was also kind of cold and uncool to say that about Kamala. There's no love lost there, and you could see it in the interactions.
Yeah, it's always extraordinary. Even when they do that in public, you imagine what goes on in private.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So you have a look then to this evening's event over there. You've got the Oval Office signing ceremony. There are then 3 inaugural balls, the Commander-in-Chief, Liberty, and Starlight. You're going to Starlight, is that right?
I'm going to Starlight, yeah. I might try to pop into Commander-in-Chief, but it's really hard to get around in this town, Andrew. I mean, I went to a ball last night. I spent much more time traveling than I did at the actual event. So it's just lockdown here. It's really incredible. You can't get a car anywhere.
And what's the difference between the 3 balls?
I don't really know. This is my first inauguration. I think the Starlight just happens to be the one that was part of my donor package. So I don't really know much about the specifics. I would imagine the Commander-in-Chief would have a military flavor to it. A lot of military brass, a lot of young officers, and so I'm curious. I'm told that it's a bit crazy, and as I said, the transportation is difficult. Our Uber last night was $350 to go a couple of miles. It's crazy.
$350.
Yeah, it's highway robbery, of course, but no, sorry, it's surge pricing. But there's surge pricing everywhere. The hotels are probably 4 or 5 times what they would normally be.
Right.
So it's just the nature of it. Everybody and their mother wants to be here in Washington.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I imagine it's too cold to walk anywhere, I imagine.
Yeah, you have to anyway, though. You have to bundle up. It's the only way to do it. I actually went to Fox News this morning and took the metro. I've never been on the metro here in Washington, but it was either walk 30 minutes in the cold or hoof it on a train for 3 stops. So it all works out. I think many people that live in Washington that have been to inaugural events before have hightailed it out of town. It's a good time to get away.
Yeah. Now,
Hopefully
the
warmer
oath is going
weather.
to be administered by Chief Justice John Roberts. We're going to
Yeah.
have the inaugural address outlining Trump's vision. He's fairly clear what his visions are. What are the key points for you?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One is just to unleash the energy sector here in America. It's better for America, it's better for consumers, but it's also better for business. And ultimately, it's better for the world. It reduces energy prices. So there's a domestic angle to it. It makes the U.S. we are the number 1 producer of energy. That was due to Trump's policies in the first term. And in spite of Biden's hostility to the energy sector, he learned his lesson after the first few years when gas prices were up 60%. Very hard to be reelected with inflation, and that was a big challenge for Biden, obviously. So President Trump will ultimately create lower energy prices for American consumers, but also for businesses. Right now, the UK businesses pay 5 times what US businesses pay for electricity. And that's just a complete insult to Miliband and the so-called, I love this oxymoron, the Minister of Energy Security and Net Zero. Talk about a contradiction in terms. And so President Trump will start with the energy sector. The second thing is just liberating the rest of the private sector with deregulation. Really important that happens. And I think you'll see that day one in terms of reducing the regulatory burden with some executive actions. And the third thing is the border. The border has turned into a humanitarian crisis. I've been to a few events this weekend about the sex trafficking and human trafficking, especially around child sex trafficking. I know that's a big issue in the UK with the rape gangs. It's a big issue here. So there's a lot of similarities between those topics where, young girls are being trafficked across the border, 100% due to Biden's open border policy. He literally opened the border in January 21 on day one. So, Biden's day one was, let's shut down the energy sector as best we can. Let's take the sanctions off Nord Stream 2 so Vladimir Putin can pump more oil and sell more natural gas, and then open the border, which has created not just a border crisis, but every state has become a border state because
Yeah,
and,
no,
and Vice President Harris.
yeah, extraordinary, and some very valid points on that. The other thing as well, Greg, is just in terms of the optics on some of the key people being invited. There's obviously the tech execs, so Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg, all going to be sat together, a combined wealth of about 880 billion.
Yeah.
What's that message to the world?
Well, the message to the world, I think, is that, we love prosperity and it's the land of opportunity. So these guys, many of whom are immigrants, if you look at the top, the big FANG stocks, the big seven, whatever, magnificent seven, 4 of the 7, I believe, are run or owned, majority owned by or founded by migrants, legal immigrants. I think that's a testament to the American dream. People want to move to America. There's a reason for that. And the second thing is, maybe the second reason is free speech, which is also a big issue in both of our countries, in the U.S. and the U.K. And there's some real scar tissue about the censorship, not only from the 2020 election when, Facebook and Twitter censored Hunter Biden laptop, but also after that, when there was censorship of the Great Barrington Declaration and anybody who disagreed with the government propaganda that was coming out of Washington. And the Biden campaign and then Biden White House actively worked with those tech companies to censor. And so now Biden's, in his farewell speech or his farewell address in the Oval Office was talking about this tech industrial complex. That's really convenient when he was embracing the tech industrial complex only a few years ago to censor news from Americans.
Yeah. And the other interesting invitation and maybe we'll spotlight is the relationship with China. And the Chinese Vice President Han Zheng is going to be attending as a guest of Trump. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. There's no doubt that China's an adversary. That's why President Trump was very critical of the very unfair and very unfree trade that we had with China, and put sanctions on the Chinese, specifically addressing the CCP and their statist mercantilist economy. So I think it's great that President Trump is reaching out, and maybe they can do some of this without massive tariffs or trade wars, and then just clean up the trade and make it free, make it fair, and have the hopefully a creative way to putting an end to China basically exporting cheap labor around the world.
Yeah, and I mean, and talking of China, I mean, this is one of the things that Elon mentions when they talk about TikTok, and Trump has stepped in now, and TikTok will be back in operation. But Elon's posted say, well, okay, that's fine having TikTok in America, but I can't have X in China.
Right. He's got a great point. And none of these social media companies are permitted by Big Brother in China. That has to be fixed. Or, the TikTok will have to be sold to an American company. And as President Trump pointed out in the rally yesterday, the new owners will be the American citizens. The U.S. will own, according to his plan anyway, 50% of TikTok when it's sold to a U.S. buyer. So there's a lot of upside for Americans keeping TikTok because it's popular. Let's face it, it's a really popular platform. But the fact that data is being sent or controlled by the CCP, it's just something that's unacceptable to Americans. So there'll be a good compromise coming out of this.
You mentioned beforehand about tariffs, and that's a favorite word that President Trump has mentioned several times.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a knock-on effect. If he imposes lots of tariffs on everybody,
Sure.
The world will be saying, well, okay, we'll do the same to America. What's the latest on that?
Well, look, there was no real negative effects from the tariffs in this first term, in spite of all the criticism from the left and from the corporate media. And so I think that there's a lot of hype about it. I think tariffs will be used carefully. Scott Bessent's a reliable Secretary of the Treasury, and I think that he'll be involved in making sure that there aren't, adverse effects from it. But if it's used to make trade more fair, then great, because we don't really have free and fair trade. So I think it's important to use it as a tool. Yes, there'll be a revenue to it. Yes, there'll be a negotiating tool angle to it where he'll threaten tariffs and get outcomes that he and the Americans want. He did this in his first term, threatening Mexico, and that resulted in the Remain in Mexico policy at the border, which was really successful. And the third thing is we have to look out for critical industries in the U.S. Right now, like the U.K., we're completely dependent on China in too many sectors, notably rare earth minerals and other critical minerals, where 90% of the rare earths are processed in China. So if we use tariffs to encourage American domestic production, especially with the deregulation in many of these sectors, that's just good for America and good for the world, especially good for the West.
Yeah, and Trump is also due to assign 100 executive actions. We've talked about mass deportations, tariffs, pardons, and the rollback of energy and climate regulations. And obviously, we talked about TikTok as well. Talk to me about those pardons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, who I've read a couple of, speculative articles about it, but look, I think, it's important and Trump to pardon people who have been unjustly prosecuted. This will be nothing compared to the Biden pardons, where he's broken every traditional norm in releasing prisoners, violent felons, releasing people, basically overruling the courts and the justice system on capital punishment, and in a really cynical way. He took, I believe, 17 of the 20 prisoners on federal death row sentences, and yet he left 3 that were sort of popular with the people. It's just really, incredible. So I think President Trump will look at people who were unjustly prosecuted or have served enough time for thought crimes, like we have in the UK. When you see people going to jail for 18, 24 months for thought crimes, and yet you have gang rape criminals or felons on the street in 9 or 12 months. I mean, it's really just outrageous. So I think we have the same problem here. President Trump will do a good job of rectifying some of those issues, but I don't think he'll do blanket pardons like Joe Biden has.
Yeah. And what generally then, what has been the reaction amongst American expatriates in the UK to Trump's win?
It's been fantastic. And again, a big contingent of them are here in Washington this week. There's such an optimism here. I hope it spreads to the UK, which, could use some optimism right now. We in the UK are going through a real rough patch here. I don't blame Labor 100%. I think the Tories set it up rather well for having almost a center left economic policy, price caps, wage, price caps and windfall taxes and fracking ban. This lunacy of the net zero climate fanaticism is really hurting the economy, and it's ultimately hurting people's pocketbooks. And I think when people start to realize the cost of net zero, they'll start to really reject it. They've started already, and that's one of the reasons reform is doing so well. Is just this rejection of net zero insanity, which is kind of a luxury issue in Westminster and in Islington, but it's one that affects the working people much.
Yeah. And talk about then your role of Republicans overseas UK. What role did they play during this election cycle, and how does it plan to support the new administration?
Well, I think a lot of it is fundraising because we surely don't compete with the Democrats in terms of numbers in the UK. For obvious reasons, the Democrats, the new demographic profile of that party is college educated, graduate degrees, the urban elite. So that's what you're going to get in terms of the majority of American voters in London and even throughout the country. The type of people that do get transferred to the UK or do move to the UK. Now, we are the exceptions, of course, because we believe in the policies that liberate working people, even though we might not be working on an assembly line at an auto plant. So I think I think in terms of vote getting, I don't think we move the needle. Quite frankly, I think the Democrats were much more stronger to move the needle. The country that really moved the needle in terms of Republicans overseas was Israel. 300,000 Republican voters in Israel. That definitely moved the needle in states like Pennsylvania, New York, Florida, where you have a big Jewish voting population, even Ohio, Illinois. So, we didn't win all those states, but they definitely helped. Whereas in the UK, it's more of making the argument. We do a lot of media, as you know, so we're making the philosophical argument. That's in our particular case in the UK more important than vote getting because we just don't have the numbers. The other thing that we did, we had a fundraiser in June. We raised over $2 million for the Trump campaign and the Republican Party. So, that we really kind of put ourselves on the map in terms of attention and connectivity to the administration. So that was good news for us. Hopefully next time we'll register more voters because it's now becoming quite trendy to be a Republican, to be a conservative. So I think we'll do much better in the midterms and in the next presidential election. And that's just, we're moving, generally moving to the right. You see President Trump polling at 50. He never topped 47 in his first term. His transition is polling at 55. Biden's approval ratings, when I say Trump at 50, he's 50-50 approved, disapproved. Biden's at 36 approval. It's probably an all-time low. Even it's a point lower than Jimmy Carter's low. So, there's a lot of optimism here, but it's really spread to the American crowd in the UK. It's great to see.
Right. And just in terms of the economy, then, we touched on that earlier. He's promised major economic changes. What implications do you think these will have for expatriates and businesses in the UK?
Well, yeah, the one that's really specific to American expats is ending worldwide taxation on Americans living abroad. So that was a vote getter for us. I'm not saying we got 1 million votes, but that was definitely a vote getter for us. That's important. I also think just the general liberalization of the private sector, the deregulation, that affects all of us. And you've got young people in the UK that maybe were transferred by a bank or something. They're making 70 or 100,000 pounds, and they're spending 1,500 of that on tax preparation because of the reporting requirements. It's really all consuming in many ways. So I think that's what's the specific thing that might be have an effect on American expats, but just the economic growth in general. And look, Biden literally banned LNG exports or further development of LNG exports. That affects the United Kingdom. Now, of course, if I were running your great country, I would liberate the energy sector there. Remember, that Great Britain was in energy independence in 2005. You have plenty of natural gas. That would be the most efficient, and by the way, carbon-friendly way to liberate your economy and to liberate the energy sector. But instead, because of his net zero insanity, started by the Tories, of course, you have to import your natural gas, and that's going to be done whether it's from, hopefully not the Russians, but buying LNG from the US. It helps us, right? It's profitable for America, but it's very expensive for British consumers. And that's unfortunate, but it's better than the alternative right now.
Yeah. And how soon do you think they're going to stop this worldwide taxation of Americans abroad?
I don't, it's not going to happen overnight. It has to be passed by Congress. This is going to be part of the tax package, which is really the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. It's really important that we accomplish that. It's the number one agenda in many respects of this administration, surely of the Treasury right now. So that will be part of the package. I don't know if it gets passed. These things, sometimes there's momentum, sometimes they just get tossed, and overlooked. I hope it works, not necessarily for my sake, because I'm going to come under the new tax problems in the UK. And you're seeing, last I read, 11,000 millionaires have left the United Kingdom. It's up, at least 50% from the year before. Maybe it was 150. I can't remember. That's really more important to me right now than the American taxation, because if you make most of your money in the U.S., you're going to pay the tax anyway. But if I'd rather pay 25% than 45%. So it's really going to. I think that the UK tax problem is going to be much more important for Americans in the UK, as you see a mass exodus beginning on April 5th or maybe even before.
Yeah. Finally, Greg, because I know you're in big demand
Yeah.
in Washington, as someone who's seen so many political cycles, so what are your personal reflections on this moment in history?
Well, it's just exciting to be here because of the optimism and the way that the voters have embraced President Trump and his optimism. But also, this was the greatest political comeback perhaps of all time. I mean, just massive comeback and fighting against assassination attempts and reckless indictments and weaponization of the justice system and of really hostile media and hostile institutional class, universities and the big government, the bureaucracy. It's just amazing that he was able to win, and it's a testament to him. I mean, I think most politicians would have rolled over and just stayed in their cave, but President Trump was really fascinated by leading Americans, and he really cares about the American people. So this is a great moment for politics.
Fantastic. Greg Swenson, thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to catching up fully when you're back in London.
Great to see you, Andy.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.